trying out different scenarios.
Yeah, there's really something to be said for practice, though. You know, I know when the tornadoes hit Brown's Ferry, which is, you know, where I focused most on, but when the tornadoes hit, there was so much chaos, because so many things went wrong, that everyone was discombobulated by it. And an hour later, there was another shutdown, you know, because someone was distracted. Basically, one of the operators was just distracted. They didn't see that the water level in one of the filling pools had gone down too long. So that kind of thing, you know, can happen just because there's so much chaos. And so I guess it seems like there needs to be so many layers of people overseeing one another and the overall picture. And, you know, the practice is what helps you deal with chaos.
As an
Well,
example,
let me respond to that, because you used a couple of purple words in there that really weren't true to that event. All three reactors scrammed based on the loss of offsite power because of the tornado coming through the different areas where the offsite and of course the outgoing power goes through. So all three plants responded as expected. The operators responded and maintained the plant in a safe condition at all times. Our resident inspectors were on site and they were in the control room and observed the licensee's actions. And you can actually see where we have documented that trip, or those trips in our inspection report. So to describe it as chaos is really not truly what happened. Yes, the control rooms did have a loss of offsite power. The plant did scram. Water was maintained in the reactor vessels. The plant essentially responded as you would have expected to. The emergency diesel generator started and maintained power to the components that were needed on site. So, and the emergency organizations were stood up. The NRC Region 2 Incident Response Center, we stood up, and like I said, we had the resident inspectors on site observing the licensee's activities throughout the event.
Now, I know you were there, and I'm so glad you were there, because I think it was important that the whole situation was observed. One of the, there were multiple emergencies after the scrams happened.
Well, that was, I don't want to minimize that tornado on the loss of life and property in that area. That was a tornado that impacted thousands of people, resulted in a large loss of life. But I think one of the things that we don't want to do is to imply that the Browns Ferry plant did not respond and was not maintained in a safe configuration.
Well, it wasn't.
So I differ with you on that.
Well, okay, you can differ with me on that, and, you know, I've documented that, the reasons that it wasn't. And I know that TBA makes a stand, and apparently NRC is backing them.
We based, I based my assessment based on the NRC inspectors that are completely independent of TBA.
Well, I know, I'm just saying that the NRC seems to be backing the TBA position.
We formed our own independent conclusions based on we're not backing the statements. We performed and identified and came to our own independent conclusions.
I would like to see that more on this.
I just want to let you know that the NRC was involved and
I know
we were
you
there.
were.
And
Yeah.
I had resident inspectors in the control room when those plants scrammed because of the tornado warning.
The first scram, and then
They all were pretty close
three
together.
emergencies after that. So, you know, it was a problem.
Okay.
And things did not perform as they were designed, including the 100, you know, only 12 of 100 offsite sirens operating.
That's, from the loss of offsite.
Yeah, that was.
I couldn't give
But
it a
there were, I think there were three pretty major events after the three scrams.
Fortunately, I believe the sirens actuated the public's response to turn on the radio, so I think that there wasn't a lack of information. I think that it was important that people listen and took actions based on the tornado warning, and I agree that there are always lessons learned that come out of these type of things.
That's very simple.
I understand. They're all
I'm
important.
talking about the procedures, you know, these wild events that can happen here, and, you know, I know there are a lot of tornadoes in this area, so this is a scenario that, I think the NRC needs more, study on tornado events in this area.
Yes, ma'am, I have been within 200 yards of 2 tornadoes, so I do not take them lightly. All matter of time. Okay. Jonathan, is there anything?
To John, here, Alabama.
Yes, sir.
In regard to the change of flood level, all the procedures and all the calculations been issued now with the on-site organizations and the off-site organizations to address the new flooding level.
With respect to the procedures on site, yes. And one of the primary corrective actions the licensing agent took when discovering the flood levels required the replacement of those HESCO barriers as compensatory measures to prevent overtopping the dams, to prevent the condition from reaching the site. So doing that restored the adequacy of the procedures. The team did note during the inspection that the licensee has an open license amendment request to define or get approval from the NRC. So that's currently being reviewed by the agency.
So the new flood level has not been determined yet?
The license amendment request has not been issued yet, but the HESCO barriers prevent the higher flood level conditions from occurring at the site.
Yeah, the licensee has completed the hydrology
That's what I mean.
assessment,
So they do know what the flood level will
Right.
be at the site.
and then what they've done is they've taken that new flood level and submitted it to the NRC to update their license based on the new flood level.
Has the all-site organizations completed all their calculations and issues that determines the new flood level?
That was the hydrology assessment that you
It's
did
all been
before.
done. It's
Yes.
all been done.
Yeah, that's all, that's like a valley-wide assessment, you know, they essentially have to look at everything to come up with those
That's
levels.
all complete
Yes.
for all the sites. You mentioned 27 hours being your time to prepare. For example, right now, if one of the dams will fail upstream, who is responsible to notify the watch party in the control room?
That's TVA River Ops, and part of,
Do they know, do that
Yes.
person know that he's responsible
Yep.
to notify you?
This surprising.
okay,
Yeah, so part of the question is, do we know who will notify the control room? Yes, as part of our establishment of these procedures guidelines, it's very clear within our organization, within TVA as a whole, the coordination between the River Operations Organization and the Nuclear Power Group. We've firmly laid that out, and that 27 hours includes all the communications from River Operations that monitors the level, looks at the weather that could impact us, looks at what is going on upstream and valley. And they would be the ones that would notify the control room certain times, and then we would take actions based on that time. So we would have the warning 27 hours in advance.
So the 27 hours includes making sure people who are off-site presently would be come to the site.
Yes, sir.
They've been trained to perform their function.
We have trained our employees that are responding to this, on these procedures, on the actions that are required to implement the procedures to respond to flood mitigation.
And you're confident that that communication link between the hydraulics people who are monitoring the dams and the control room is valid and remains operable under all conditions?
Certainly. Very much.
and we've inspected that, we verified that the River Ops has those procedures, the River Ops people know that that's a requirement. We've also verified on our end, looking at that 27 hours, we looked at the TVA timelines with very jaundiced eye because of the initial violation. So my resident inspectors, observed the walk downs, the time verifications, and we were very critical of those time the timelines.
Do the river ops people realize that they're a part of the Washbar design control process?
Yes, they do
One
now.
of their process.
That was another part of our inspection, was to verify that.
And they notify everybody immediately if they come up with 1 more inch higher water level at Washbar.
And not only that, but we verified other off-site organizations that may have an impact on the Watts Bar or Sequoia or Browns Ferry design basis, that communication there is now known to be required. I mean, that was part of our inspection also to verify that.
When we talk about the deterministic evaluation, what type of events, and Lee kind of got into this, what other events do you assume happen? Do you assume that the dam fails and we also have a seismic event? Do you assume an active single failure? Do you assume off-site power remains at the site? Do you lose on-site electrical power? Does the operator make 1 single failure? I'm just looking for what other events you propose concurrent with the loss of the upstream dams.
You know, it might be worth talking about these. There is no single dam failure that will give you a flooding event at the site. It might be worth mentioning that these are combinations of events to even get to the point we're talking about. So you might want to address
I
that.
guess, the worst case situation is preceded by days and days of rain. So, and we have precursor trigger points at river operations where if they even see the potential for the flood that we're talking about, we're notified well in advance, so we can take actions well in advance to shut the plant down and put it in safe condition.
And that's proceduralized.
Yes, sir, it is.
That's our governing procedure that we talked about, that we've gone through and validated and demonstrated that we can execute these actions, whatever condition put it where the flooding would occur.
And the 27 hours is the most limiting case. And it takes multiple dam failures from a seismic event and what they use for the analysis is 1/2 of the rain that Dave described, which rather than being, I guess, 6 to 9 days of rain would be half that. So it's a combination. To get that short one, that 27-hour one, it takes the seismic event, multiple dam failures, and the rain to get there. All the other flooding events are much longer time frame events than 27.
Right. You have more time to. Washbar Unit 1 is considered a wet site. So you do let a number of buildings flood.
Yes, sir.
Which buildings that contain safe-related equipment actually are allowed to flood?
Well, our auxiliary building, it's a building that contains safety-related equipment, does flood. Those barriers I showed you in that picture, that is that building. That building actually gets water in it. We reconfigured the plant though, so that other safety-related equipment in other buildings that does not flood provides the necessary cooling for the site.
So you don't take any credit for any safe-related equipment inside the ops building that floods?
What we do, our design response is, we understand it is a wet site. The equipment required to protect the core in the event of a flood is protected and will operate in the event of a flood. So we've designed our site, understanding, that it's a wet site, that all the equipment that is necessary is protected in the event of a flood, and our procedures ensure that the equipment's ready and operating.
And so when that building does flood, you do understand what effects that could have on that equipment, such as pipes floating, penetration seals being damaged, you understand that.
We understand that is within our design that we know, and we've protected the equipment that is required.
And kind of along with that, I assume you're looking at Unit 2's construction to make sure they don't do anything over there to jeopardize the Unit 1 floodplain. Because they could jeopardize seals, equipment, any number of things.
We're ensuring as part of the construction that the work, that Unit 2 will meet all these designs in the event of a flood, and there will be no impact on Unit 1.
Just a couple of quick questions. Did this flooding change affect your probabilistic risk assessment for external floods? You do have a probabilistic risk assessment for external floods. Did this impact it?
The
change in level, in flood level?
That was
Change-
considered.
did it change
Yeah, I
beforehand?
understand your question, I used to be to see the risk analysis. I want to make sure I answer your question specifically. The issues that took us, that resulted in the yellow finding and the white finding, were based on the conditions that existed prior to 2009, prior to the installation of HESCO barriers. Those evaluations were assessed and resulted in the increase in potential for core damage, and that's where we ended up with the grading point. That's the risk assessment that I was. Subsequent to 2009, there was the HESCO barriers were installed, and then subsequent to that, actually, with some very fine work with Mr. Monk, was the identification of the 27 hours to implement the actions to mitigate the flood. Those type of inputs go into the risk assessment, and specifically into it's referred to as the IPEEE or the external events analysis. So when you look at the conditions and assessment from earlier on and the impact on the site, that was one initiating event frequency, and it was based on an understanding of what they understood the flood levels would be, and then the impact of overtopping, and then subsequent to the installation of the HESCO barriers. So the way you look at the risk assessment is, I would say, yes, it is put into that, and that it looks at the frequency of flooding, in other words, the probable maximum flood that would occur on site, and you have to look at what existed prior to 2009 and post 2009. So those initiating event frequencies do play into the risk assessment. The mitigating actions all play into the risk assessment, and the installation of those permanent barriers around the different components, those all play into the risk assessment, and the ability to implement the procedure in the time frame. That all plays into the risk assessment. Now remember, those were the most limiting conditions. So you also have other potential floods that you need to evaluate, and whether or not maximum rainfall events and things of that nature, what their impact could be. And although it may not result in the same flooding, you can still have other impacts on the facility. Those initiated event frequencies then play into the overall risk assessment. So to answer your question, after giving you that explanation, because it's not necessarily a simple answer, is yes, those are input into the risk model.
Overall, did the risk from flooding, external flooding at Lost Bar increase before 2009 and right now today?
No, we've gone through.
The risk hasn't gone, external, the absolute values for external flooding, IPEEE does not increase.
It has not increased.
I guess I can find that in some of your submittals. I'm just curious if this addressed.
Yeah, I think within our within the license amendment request,
I believe those values
those values are.
And the same thing to be said for the road values. Or early release.
Yeah, on early release. Don't call up, yes.
It might be worth, just for perception here, talk about what the original licensing basis flood level elevation was and what it is now.
So you can put me on the spot.
Your one question, let's go.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask Darlene to help me with that.
Yeah,
The numbers? The actual numbers.
Yeah.
Including.
The original was,
plain rock.
original 738 line, original,
How much?
738 line.
738 feet.
And I think with all the rim leakage, that's what, 739?
739.5.
Well, that's with
That's what the waiver
fudge,
was.
but I mean,
That's
I thought I
right.
read
739.
741.7.
that is if the HESCO barriers were not in place.
Okay. Are they gonna be part of the permanent site structure?
No.
They're just only temporary?
But they're gonna be replaced by something equivalent to that.
They're temporary.
Just two more questions, real quick. Has the same philosophy been applied to downstream dams? Because obviously we're interested in what happens if you lose a downstream dam. It doesn't flood the site, obviously, but you have to make sure you can
We've looked at
mitigate. So you also apply all this philosophy also, during the time that you actually have the flood, I don't know how many hours you're assuming it occurred, do you have to have any external supplies such as fuel oil and things like that brought in? And have you considered that?
We have considered it, we have looked at, and our procedures are structured, we can, as we need them, we will be able to get the supplies.
You have verified that diesel
Yes.
fuel will be available even though the entire area
We
is
have made
flooding?
arrangements, yes, to ensure that we have what we need to ensure the plants continue to be safely operated in the flood.
Number of square miles that are
Yes.
flooded.
Any other questions, sir? Okay. Any other questions?
Tara?
Please, no, that's why you're here. You made a long trip to be here.
Thank you, I did.
I recognize that.
The number of emergency diesel generators, at the plant and, for each reactor and, for the cooling pools and, and the fuel situation for them, how long you can, sustain
Do you want us to do that?
if there's no power to the plant.
That's, but we,
Bob, you want to handle that?
You wanna know how long they can run without
I
bringing fuel
want to know how many
on
there
site?
are for each plant and cooling pool and.
Well, there's four
for
emergency
each
diesel-
reactor,
There's
excuse me.
4 emergency diesel generators,
Uh-huh,
and right now only one of the plants operates.
Right.
So they've almost got twice. There's 2 diesels there that, Unit 2's not running, so they have almost installed backup right there.
so the
So,
design is 2 for each
2
reactor.
for each reactor, so all 4 are tested. Every week, one of those diesels is tested, and we go watch it crank up and run. Every week, they test one of those diesels, so once a month, each diesel gets tested.
I'm glad to hear that. Does that happen at all the TDA plants?
Yeah.
happens at
Is
all.
that, is
That's
that
their
since
plan.
That's
Fukushima
a
or what?
specification requirement.
That's always been a requirement?
I was Bob's predecessor from 2000, 2007, and when I was here, I'd go out and watch those diesels run.
I was a resident inspector in the early eighties up through the nineties, and I used to watch emergency diesel
Okay,
generators.
this is anecdotal, you know.
No, it's not anecdotal, it's factual.
It's
And
important.
the tornadoes, when Browns Ferry, the tornadoes came and cut off power to Browns Ferry, 3 of the 8 generators did not operate. 2 of them were out of commission the first, when it happened, and, 1 broke down,
One was
the
out.
next day.
There were
So
some out
that's
for
a
maintenance, which is
40%,
permissible,
almost
and
30%.
there was one that was, a decision was made to shut it down because of a fuel oil leak, and the decision was to shut it down because it was not needed at the time.
Oh, really? Okay. So you didn't need it, so that's why it was shut
I
down.
won't ever see you don't need emergency
It was
power.
shut down
I'm not
because
gonna
it
say
was
that.
not operative, it was not
But the
working
demands of the
properly.
plant
It
for
went
cooling
around.
were being met by the operating diesel generators.
Here's an example, the
So,
four
excuse me,
diesel.
but I didn't want that spun, I just wanna ask you straight out. Were
Oh, no,
all
be-
8, diesel generators, according to you, operating as they should be? Or were only
Well-
6 of them or 5 of them?
Depends on what time we're referring to. Diesels are taken out of service for maintenance with the plants in operation. That is permissible by
I
the
understand
technical
that.
specification.
Yes.
So there were
And one
diesels
of them was
out
out
of
of
service.
operation when the tornadoes
out,
hit.
that is correct.
So
And
there's
the subsequent
7
one,
left.
and another one was shut down later because of a fuel oil leak.
Right.
They made a decision to shut that down. I believe there was one other that they also shut down later on after, I think it was a day or so.
The next day, yeah.
And but all the electrical emergency supplies were being met.
Thank goodness they had that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's redundancy.
Yeah, that's why I watched Bard, you know, of those 4, for them to safely shut down and keep the plant cool, they only need 2. So that's why there's extras.
So that works for the cooling pools as well. That keeps the cooling systems all going.
Yeah,
I'm not just- You're talking about spent fuel that's not in the reactor?
Yes, I'm talking about spent fuel.
Yes.
So,
All those diesels.
Those
supply
2
that.
generators for each reactor is adequate. So if one of them goes out, it's still adequate,
The other one can handle all
or
of
both
those.
the reactor and the cooling pool?
Yes.
Well, it's one pool and there's 3 pumps, so they have different power supplies. to
No,
that
I'm
pool.
asking if there's no power, if the generators are the only source of power, which is what happened at Brown's Ferry.
There are actually ways to keep that pool cool without those diesel generators.
Is that the ice?
No, that's in containment. No, as the pool heats up, it'll boil. And they have other systems that they can put water into that pool, and as long as you keep water in there, the fuel's
They
not
don't
gonna be
depend
damaged.
on electricity or the diesel?
I'm saying there is a
generator?
backup way of doing it if you don't have electricity. Normally, you expect to have
And
electricity.
it's not driven by the generators? Oh, is it, what, do you have a lake up above or something?
No, they
I'm
have a
just wondering.
5,000 GPM pump
Uh-huh.
on a trailer that they can pull in and connect up and put water in the spent fuel pool, or the fire main system can do it if it's still functional.
I see, so it's an external kind of a fire truck or something that you can bring in to pump?
And it's right there on the plant site.
Yeah, it's dedicated for these
That's,
kind of
well,
responses.
I'm glad to hear it. Now, how long can this happen? Can this be sustained if power will cut? How long?
Well,
Will the?
one of the methods of hooking it up, you take the suction off the cooling tower, and the cooling towers are made up to from the dam, which is the river. So as long as the river's running, they can get water to that pump.
But the pump depends on diesel fuel, am I not right?
It's got its own diesel tower. It's on a flatbed trailer, integral pump, diesel engine, and they have diesel fuel for it.
And
Separate
the diesel
from the-
fuel that's.
Separate from the diesels.
I understand. So the diesel fuel for the 4 generators plus the truck, the one truck for the, you have 3 pools, is that right?
No, one pool.
You have 1 pool.
This only has one.
Okay, 1 pool, 1
There's
truck.
3
So-
pumps that are installed that circulate water. And then you can add water by these other backup methods.
This truck, excuse me for being ignorant about this, but, I'm
Well,
not
it's not
as
something we
well
normally talk about.
versed on this. But the truck actually provides the power for these 3 pumps to provide water.
Now,
Let me put this into context, because I
Excuse
really,
me, I
no, I
really
don't
have
want to cut
this
you off.
reaction.
I understand what you're asking. I don't want to cut you off, but I don't want to get into too much of the specifics as to how the plant and other facilities may deal with activities that could inform other individuals. What I will tell you is.
Are you saying it's a security issue?
I'm saying that there are aspects that can be used in all different scenarios. What there are is the capabilities of supplying water to the spent fuel pool through different means other than keeping it cool through the spent fuel pool cooling system to maintain level and to provide them makeup. And as Mr. Monk indicated, it can be through the fire system, it can be from the circulating water system, and, just intuitively, you have to realize that there has to be a means, a motive force of providing that water to the pool, and those do exist.
Well, I'm so glad you have this secret means to keep it safe, but I'm still wondering how long are we, if this worst case scenarios or multiple events happen, how long, can you keep it going? The safety systems. I mean, how much diesel fuel do you have stored away
Well, there
to
are,
keep this
there are
going?
day tanks on site, there are diesel fuel oil storage tanks, and then there are additional fuel oil storage tanks, as well as the ability to bring in additional supplies to the site to make up.
So
They have
have you
30
figured it
days.
out for a week you can do this?
They have 30 days of fuel oil on site.
30 days, that's great. That's, okay, I'm
In
hugely
contract-
relieved to hear that.
And there's
I don't know
contracts out
why
there.
that would be a problem to tell me that.
And they're required to have contracts out there for makeup to those tanks. I mean, that's something we require, is they have contracts with a
Right,
vendor to bring
presuming
fuel
they
in.
can get to it, yeah. That's, but 30 days, is a huge, to me, that's just great news. I'm just very happy to hear that. I should
And actually,
make everybody
those
in the room get
Those
this.
requirements are in their technical